So just wanted to quick give you a reference. We're trying more and more to post stuff on our school website. So our website was redesigned over the summer. So if you go to the junior senior high school website under counseling center, we have all kinds of different information about college planning, graduation, local resources, and then pertaining to tonight, scholarships and financial aid. So we have one from last year that Miss Meeks and I did. This is going to be much better than the one that Meeks and I did. And then just other scholarship information. So if I haven't introduced myself, I'm Mr. Marlin. I'm one of the school counselors here at the school. I work with students' last names M through Z. With that being said, I will hit present and turn it over to Rachel from MSU.
All right. Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me? Wonderful. Thank you so much all for coming out tonight to talk a little bit about financial aid, the financial aid application, the process for the year ahead. And so really, I want to make this time as valuable as possible for all of you, because I know that as students, as families, you're going to have a lot of financial aid questions for the year ahead. So really, I want to give just kind of a brief, broad overview of what timeline you're going to expect for the year ahead. So things that you should be doing now, things that you should be looking forward to for spring and summer, really setting yourself up for success for the upcoming fall term when y'all are starting college. And let's see, I'm going to go back to this one. Then we're actually going to talk about the financial aid or FAFSA application itself. So the steps that need to be done to complete the application, different information you'll want to keep in mind when going through the application, resources that are available to you, all those different things. After that, I also want to touch a little bit on what happens after you hit that submit button. So that way you'll know some kind of common financial aid processes, common questions, things that we as a financial aid office can do to most help you. I also want to talk a little bit about what types of financial aid are out there, knowing that everybody's individual financial situation is going to be very different. But this way, at the very least, you'll get a broad overview of what types are out there and potentially what to expect. And then the biggest thing is I want to leave a lot of time for questions, because I think your questions are the most valuable part of all of this, because I can give you a broad overview, broad information, but really I want to make sure that when you leave this presentation today or when you leave this auditorium today, that you're going out confident that you know how to fill out the FAFSA application, what steps are coming up next, and where to go for those additional resources if questions come along the way. So when we look at the suggested timeline, so right now, the biggest thing on all of your plates is to fill out that FAFSA application. Now, the FAFSA opens every year on October 1st. So this is not the only year that you're going to be completing this application. So you'll all be completing it now for this upcoming 22-23 school year. And then every year after that, continue to mark your calendar for October 1st, because you'll want to continue to complete that application. This is also a great time to be researching and visiting different colleges, really narrowing down where you as the student want to go. If you haven't already, make sure to start your scholarship search as well, looking at what do schools offer as far as incoming student scholarships, but then looking broader to see what national scholarships are out there, and definitely connecting with your high school guidance counselor to see what kind of local opportunities there are, what kind of opportunities they know that are available. It looks like you have a great resource on your website for additional scholarship information, so certainly doing that. Our presentation is actually really timely today because this is also the time to be applying for colleges. And if you are looking at a state of Minnesota college, so like MSU Mankato, for example, the month of October is free application month. So if you're even remotely considering going to a state college or MSU Mankato, this is the month to submit that application. You'll save yourself some application fees. So certainly month of October, definitely time to get those applications in. All schools have different deadlines. So depending on what other schools you're looking at, keep an idea of what kind of application deadlines they have. Make sure to get those in a timely manner. Then, once we're looking forward to winter and spring, that's really when the financial aid offices start processing your FAFSA applications that they would have received this fall, and they'll start to give you ideas of what to financially expect for the year ahead. So we at MSU Mankato and a lot of other schools are going to release what are called preliminary award notices. And they're going to detail out, based on your FAFSA application, all the different federal and state aid eligibility that you may have, along with any institutional aid they may offer. And that's a great opportunity to sit down as a family, compare, contrast, see what financial package is most beneficial to you, what would be the best fit financially. So it's a great time to compare those costs, make a financial decision. Applying for scholarships isn't over at that point, so continue to do so. And that's something I'm going to stress throughout this presentation today, is to always be applying for scholarships. I tell any student that walks into my office, I know as students, you are insanely busy. You are in your senior year, you're doing well in classes, you're applying for colleges, you're doing this financial aid application. But let's say you set aside 1 hour a week to fill out a scholarship application. And then after 10 weeks, let's say you get one $500 scholarship. That's $50 an hour. So even if you're setting aside that little bit of time every week, it's going to add up over time. So knowing to apply for scholarships, both fall, spring, and I'm probably going to mention it for summer too. But summer 2022, that's when you would have decided what college you're attending. You would have signed up for the orientation there. You'd get registered for classes, get all the excitement going for the upcoming school year ahead. And that's when you're going to get that official financial aid award. And that one's going to detail out that official aid eligibility. That's when you as a family then would go in, review your official aid eligibility, accept any loans as needed, apply for other loan options as needed, really get that financial plan set in place, set in stone, ready to go for the fall term. And then once fall of 2022 rolls around, that's when you as the students are starting classes, getting ready to go, and then making sure that your bill is paid at whatever school you attend. And then, of course, squirreling in the back of your brain for October 1st of next year to already be doing your FAFSA for your sophomore year. So that's kind of the full year cycle of what to expect for the year ahead in a very condensed crash course. So when we're looking at that first step then, so what are we doing right now? We're looking at filling out that FAFSA application for the 2022-2023 school year. And the first step to filling out a FAFSA application is to create your FSA ID. Now, what is an FSA ID? It is your, as the student's, electronic signature. So the student is going to go in to FAFSA.gov. It has the option there to create an FSA ID. You as the student will create your own username, your own password. You'll fill out all those challenge questions. Make sure to store these in a safe and secure place, because you're going to use this electronic signature every single year that you're in college, as well as after college when you're managing any student loan indebtedness you may have. So it's a very important username and password to make sure to store safely and securely. So students are going to create their own FSA ID. Parents, you're also going to create an FSA ID. So at least one parent in the household is going to want to create their electronic signature as well, because as the parent, a part of your assistance is going to be signing the student's FAFSA application. So that's what you're going to need your FSA ID for, is to be able to electronically sign their FAFSA application after you submit it. With the FSA ID, all of your information is going to be confirmed through Social Security Administration. But the good news is that they don't make you wait before you can use it. So you actually can create it on the spot and then go right into the FAFSA application after that. Make sure when you're looking at what email to use or what email to link up with your FSA ID, don't use your school email. Reason being is that after high school ends, that email is probably going to end too. You want to use your personal email, because that way then you'll know that you'll continue to have access to that FSA ID for years down the road. This is similar to college applications as well. I would recommend using your personal email. I can't count how many times I'm trying to get a hold of a student. I go to email their personal email and it's their high school email and it's no longer valid. So really important to link that up to your personal email as a student. Make sure that you as the student and you as the parent are using 2 separate emails so that you each have your own personal email accounts that your FSA ID is linked to. You can also link it up to cell phones. I recommend doing so for that as well. It makes password retrieval so much easier. So same thing, student and parent, link it up to your individual cell phone numbers as well. And know that if you do forget your username, if you do forget your password, they have those steps on there to help you retrieve them. And certainly, if you do ever run into any questions on these, any financial aid office can help you out as well. So once you have you as the student and you as the parent, electronic signature, FSA ID, then it's time to complete the FAFSA. So the FAFSA is on FAFSA.gov. And the big thing to note about the FAFSA application for the upcoming year is that it's going to use your 2020 tax information. Now, what's great about this is that way you don't have to wait to file your taxes because your taxes are already filed and ready to go. What's nice about the FAFSA as well is that typically a lot of families are able to link up to the IRS to pull in their tax information. This is a huge time saver. So hopefully within the FAFSA application, you're able to access that button that says link to the IRS when it comes to the tax information. It'll bring you over to the IRS site. You'll enter your filing status, the address that you filed at, and it'll pull all that 2020 tax information in. But I always say it's a really good idea when going to submit that FAFSA application, have all your tax documents ready. Because there is some information that's not automatically imported over from the IRS, and it's a huge time saver if you already have it set, ready to go. That way you're not shuffling through a bunch of papers in the middle of the application. Now, one thing that I really recommend with the FAFSA, go slow, pay attention to what they're asking for. Because there is some information that's asking for 2020 tax information. There's other questions that are asking as of today. So a couple common ones that people may get tripped up on. One is marital status. So it's asking as of today, what is your marital status? So you as the parent, if you are married as of today, you'd list married. Or for example, what is the balance of your cash saving checking? It's going to ask as of today. So make sure that you have a general idea of, what your assets are, all of that as of today. The FAFSA application, so it's about 100 different data points, and it all then goes to the schools that you're looking at to then be able to determine your financial aid eligibility. So the big thing with the FAFSA application is that you as the student, even if you haven't decided where you're going to college, you can send it to up to 10 different schools. So that's really beneficial because that way, even if you're still shopping around, it pays off to fill it out early because that way you know that you're being reviewed for the most possible need-based aid. So make sure to submit it early every year because there are some forms of aid that have more limited funding pools. So the earlier you fill it out, the more beneficial it is because that way you know that you're being reviewed for the most possible aid. Typically, the FAFSA application, how it determines your aid is it takes all the data points that you enter in. So all of the parent tax information, all of the student tax information, the number in the household, number in college, parent assets, student assets, it takes all that information and it spits out what's called an expected family contribution number. Now, that number or that word is a little confusing because when we hear the word expected family contribution, it sounds like it's the amount that you have to pay out of pocket. And that's not actually the case. The expected family contribution number is a calculation number used to determine what kind of need-based financial aid you may receive. So when you see that number after you submit your FAFSA application, know that that's not like a set, this is how much you have to pay out of pocket. That's entirely a calculation number that the financial aid offices then use to determine what your aid eligibility is going to be. Really, it's once those preliminary award letters are going to be released in the spring that you really get to see what your eligibility is and take a look at what potential costs are for whatever college you may be attending. So within the parent section of the FAFSA application, I mentioned a little bit earlier about parent marital status. And so one thing that a lot of families get tripped up on is who is considered a parent for the FAFSA application. For the FAFSA, it considers biological, adoptive, or step parent married to a biological parent. So if you are the parent who's being listed on the FAFSA and you're married, you would list yourself and your current spouse. You would not want to list grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, brothers or sisters, widowed step parents, or aunts and uncles. If you as a student have a more unique family situation or family circumstance, if there's some reason why you're unable to list at least one biological or adoptive parent, reach out to your financial aid office. There is a potential separate process that we'd want to talk through. But for the most part for students, make sure that you were listing biological, adoptive, or step parent married to your biological parent when you're filling out who is the parent on the FAFSA. And marital status, once again, is really focused on as of today. The options are single, married or remarried, divorced or separated, unmarried living together, and widowed are going to be the 5. So just make sure you know as of today. Now, the IRS data retrieval tool was something I was talking a little bit more on that slide. And so this is kind of what that button looks like. So when you're filling out your tax information on the FAFSA, it's going to ask you 3 separate questions. So it's going to ask, did you file taxes? So if you as the parent did, you'd say already completed. It's going to ask what tax form you used. So typically families, it's going to be a 1040 form. And then it's going to ask that filing status, which you should be able to find right up at the top of your tax form. If the data retrieval tool is an option, this button is going to pop up that will allow you to click on it and proceed directly to that IRS site to go through that process to import those tax information over. If it's not an option for whatever reason, know that the FAFSA application has a lot of help within it. So all the questions are going to tell you exactly where on your tax form you have to find the information. So even if you can't import it over from the IRS, know that it's going to tell you, hey, this item's located on line 17. So that way transferring it over makes it a little bit of a breeze. When we're looking at asset questions, so similarly to what I was mentioning earlier, these are as of today. So when we're looking at the cash saving or checking question, don't include any student financial aid. So this is not as relevant to students newly entering college, just because you wouldn't have received any excess financial aid disbursements, but it's good to know for future years that if you as the student are filling out what's in your checking account as of today, and some of that is excess loan funds, make sure not to list those in that question. For parents, a couple of the big trip ups I see on the asset questions. One is make sure not to list your retirement account as an investment. So anything that is a 401k, 403b, 457, IRA, or Roth IRA is not going to be listed under investments. Similarly, the net worth of your primary residence or your vehicle are also not going to be investments. If you have a 529 savings plan and you're the student's name, you would want to list the value of that. Similarly, any stocks or bonds, basically liquid assets would be listed, and any net value of, like, if you own a cabin, for example, I think is a common one. So, it wouldn't be your primary residence, it would be a separate home, but you would want to take the total value of it and subtract the mortgage. So make sure that it's that net worth, not that total worth. Another question that it's going to ask is businesses or investment farms, especially around our area. We have a lot of farmers around. Don't list the value of your family farm. It's looking for businesses or investment farms with 100 or more full-time employees. So we're talking kind of those big ones. The vast majority of folks, the answer on that question is going to be 0. All right, so once you go through the FAFSA, you fill out all that information, you get your and the student's tax information in there, you fill out the asset questions, you sign and submit using that FSA ID and password. After it gets sent to all the schools, some FAFSAs are randomly selected for what's called a verification process. Now, if your FAFSA is selected for verification, it does not mean that you did anything wrong. Verification is a random selection just to confirm that the information that you submitted is correct. So sometimes you'll have schools reaching out asking for some additional documentation. Just make sure to provide that in a timely manner so that way the financial aid office can move forward in processing your FAFSA application. Make sure not to log back into your FAFSA and make corrections unless directly directed to do so. So I see this sometimes where families may log in to change one thing and then maybe another thing gets changed, and then all of a sudden we're asking for a whole bunch of other documentation. So unless we're directly telling you to change a specific line item, make sure after you submit it to leave it be. Any communication from the financial aid office is going to go directly to the student via the student's email that they submitted to the university. So typically we send it to the student's university account if they have one, and to the student's personal email that they listed on their admissions application. So those are the ones that you're going to want to keep really close tabs on, because if we need anything, that's where we're going to reach out and let you know. Common items that may be needed for verification. One is verification of household. So we may ask who's all in the household. So parents, students, siblings of students, other dependents in the household, just kind of those items. If you didn't file taxes, we may ask for a verification of non-filing form and any W-2s. If you did file taxes and you weren't able to use that IRS tool, we may ask for a copy of your tax return from 2020. So once again, it's not even necessarily that you filled out anything wrong. It's that random selection to really be able to confirm that the information entered is correct. And know that mistakes do happen, and we are here to help fix them. So if you do submit your FAFSA and you're thinking, I think I may have filled this out incorrectly, please do reach out, let us know. We're more than happy to help resolve any discrepancies. And that's true for any college that you're planning on attending. So there is a similar person like me at basically any college or university that you're planning on attending who would be more than happy to sit down, walk you through whatever's going on, figure out what kind of documentation we need. So know that you can always reach out, ask questions. All right. So one thing I always like to mention is because the FAFSA uses taxes from 2 years prior, so because we're looking at 2020 income, a lot of things may have changed by the time that you were entering college in fall of 2022. And so there is what are called special circumstances, which are those situations beyond an individual's control, which may impact the income listed on the FAFSA application. So big ones that we commonly see, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, is if you were laid off and now you're working at a new job and maybe earning less than you were before in 2020. So that's a pretty common one. If you're laid off and still unemployed, parent divorces are a common one. So if you were married at the time that you completed the FAFSA and maybe something in your marital status changed by the time the student's starting college, these are all common ones that we see. If any of these circumstances occur, reach out to your financial aid office, ask them about completing a special circumstance. Every school has a different process, different forms on what they'd need to do so. So that way then, if your financial situation is drastically different, we can potentially review you based on your current ability to cover the cost of college. And know that at MSU, our special circumstance form for the upcoming year is going to be available about mid-March. Other schools are likely similar. So, assuming that we get your FAFSA application, assuming that all verification items are completed, if anything is needed, we then would get you that preliminary award notice that may list a wide variety of different types of financial aid. And these are just some broad different categories that you may see. The first one is what's called grants. And these are those need-based financial aid items that everybody's kind of the most excited for, everyone's the most hopeful for. Anytime you see the word grant, that is money that you don't have to pay back. So that's that free money as determined by your need-based eligibility on your FAFSA application. Some common ones are the federal Pell Grant, the Minnesota State Grant, the SEOG grant, and at MSU specifically, the ALICE grant. So those are kind of those free money. If you see those on any preliminary award notices, that's that money that you don't have to pay back. And that's entirely determined based on that FAFSA application. You may then also see federal loans. And there are two different kinds of federal student loans, the subsidized loan and the unsubsidized loan. Now, a lot of times I have families come to me and say, Rachel, I am not eligible for any type of financial aid. And I typically reply and say, even if you're a billionaire, you're at the very least as a dependent student eligible for $5,500 in a federal unsubsidized loan. So you know that at the very least, if you are eligible to fill out the FAFSA, you're eligible for $5,500 in that federal unsubsidized loan to help assist. The unsubsidized loan is the federal student loan that is the student's loan solely in the student's name. It is the one that starts adding interest right away, but it's typically at a very low interest rate. Every year the interest is set in July for the year ahead. So know that, typically around summer, you're going to have a good sense of what to expect for the year ahead for federal student loans. If you see any subsidized loans on the student's preliminary award notice or official award notice, a subsidized loan is actually a loan that does not add any interest while the student's attending. So from the day the student takes out the loan to 6 months after they're done attending college, or 6 months after they drop below half time, that is an interest-free loan. It only starts adding interest 6 months after they're done attending. So that's kind of a student's best bet loan. A student may also see work study program eligibility on the FAFSA or on their preliminary award. Now, work study is a question on the FAFSA. So if you are even remotely, even like a 1% chance in your brain thinking about taking part in this program, say yes if you're interested in work study. Because work study is one of those more limited funding pools where a lot of times it's first come, first serve on completing the FAFSA application within that eligibility range. How work study works is that if the student is eligible for a work study award, the student can then apply for one of the work study jobs on campus to then earn money to go towards reducing their university expenses, either by paying that towards their university bill, living expenses, stuff like that. Work study is a great opportunity for a wide variety of reasons. One is any work study earnings are reported differently on future year's FAFSAs, so it doesn't count towards future need-based aid eligibility, which is a huge benefit. The second is it's a great way to make connections on campus. It's a great way to grow the resume. And it's a really beneficial in the sense that work study jobs, by regulation, can never conflict with your school schedule. So typically at MSU, our work study awards are between 13 and 15 hours a week, which is a really kind of good low hourly amount. It's a good amount to kind of balance with your different classes. And it's a great way to make those connections, make sure that you're earning money to reduce that loan indebtedness, build your resume. It's overall a great working experience. So that's a potential type of need-based aid that may be listed. And then, of course, any scholarships. So scholarships, there are the private scholarships that we talked about with looking at national searches, local scholarships, stuff like that. And then there are campus-based scholarships. So a lot of those are incoming student scholarships that may be awarded through the admissions office or through separate applications. A lot of those may be listed on your preliminary award if you have that eligibility. Now, we recognize that in between grants, federal loans, work study, and scholarships, that may not be enough to cover your educational expenses. And that's really where other loan options step in to help cover the remainder. Now, there are two big types of other loan options that you as a family can potentially look at. The first is what's called the Parent Plus Student Loan. So it's an additional loan program similar to the unsubsidized loan that the student's eligible for. Biggest difference is it's actually the parent who applies. So if the parent applies and is approved, they can then borrow that additional loan to help assist with educational expenses. Otherwise, there are also a lot of private lenders that offer student loans. And any school that you're looking at is going to have kind of comprehensive lists or options or information to hand out to you regarding those. Typically, how they work is that the student is going to be the one who applies for the private loan. And then, just based on age alone, they may require a cosigner. So, that's typically where mom or dad steps in, grandparent, aunt and uncle, family friend to cosign along. If you're looking at private student loans, it's really important to pick somebody with a strong credit history, because the stronger the credit history of the cosigner, the lower the interest rate that the private lender is going to offer. And it's important to compare and contrast. So if you are looking at private student loans, make sure, I usually say at least rule of three, shop around, make sure that you are getting a good low interest rate with good repayment terms. So that is kind of a very big crash course in those overall types of financial aid. Know that this is not going to be your only exposure to it. So we're still at kind of that step number one, completing the FAFSA. Once you get that preliminary award, your school is likely going to send you a lot of information on what those awards mean. And during orientation, typically, there's going to be more presentations, information, walking you through how to accept your official awards, what those awards mean as well. So this is not going to be your only exposure to this. This is just kind of your first sneak peek as far as potential things on what to expect and the wide variety of options that are out there. All right, so the last thing I always like to run through is kind of my top most helpful tips when completing that FAFSA application. So I'm bringing us all the way back to the beginning to that FAFSA step that we're all looking forward to doing, I know, as soon as possible. So, and that is the first step, is to make sure to fill out your FAFSA application as soon as possible. That way you know that you're being reviewed for the most possible need-based aid. For students and families, make sure to use your legal name as determined by Social Security Administration, exactly as it's written on your Social Security card. It'll save yourself a lot of time and hassle later on to not have to go back in and change a nickname. Make sure to proofread everything. I do see sometimes families will accidentally type in cents when they're typing in their income earnings, and all of a sudden they're saying that they made $1 million. So make sure to go slowly, take a look at it, make sure that it all looks accurate. The FAFSA, before you submit it, gives you kind of a big review page where you can glance through everything before you hit submit. I always find that really helpful. Anytime you see the word you or your in the FAFSA application, it refers to the student, because ultimately the FAFSA is the student's application. So the student is the one who logs in, they fill out all their demographic information. Mom and dad, really your job is to enter in your tax information into their FAFSA, and then the student wraps it up, you both sign and submit. So anytime it's you and your, it's really looking at the student. The help and hint button is phenomenal. So if you are looking at some of those questions and you're wondering, what does this mean? Hit that question mark with the circle. It pulls up a lot more information on whatever that is referring to or where to find the information. It also has screenshots in it, which I think is really helpful, especially if you have to pull in some tax information as far as where on the tax form you're looking to find. Once again, if you were even remotely considering work study, make sure to hit yes. It's a lot easier to turn it down later than it is to go to the financial aid office and say, oh shoot, I actually do want to take part in the work study program. And I can't stress this enough, be as accurate as possible. Take that time to make sure that those numbers are correct. It'll save you some editing hassle in the future. And then when you are creating that FSA ID and password for both the student and the parent, make sure to write those down, store them in a safe and secure location. Hopefully you have a password system that you can store things in, because you'll be using it year after year, every October when you fill out that FAFSA. So know that this is not the last time that you have to connect with me either. So we have our Campus Hub site that has all of our contact information on it. We also have our phone and email. We do advising appointments all year round. So if you do run into any questions, even if you're not our student, feel free to give us a call. And this is honestly, I'll speak for all financial aid advisors across the entire state of Minnesota. We love helping students. We want to help you get it right the first time. So even if you're not our student, we are more than happy to help answer questions, point you in the right direction, be that resource for you to make this process as painless and as easy as possible. And keep calm and file your FAFSA and apply for scholarships. So thank you all for listening to the presentation part, but most importantly, I want to be here for any questions that you may have on this information. Yeah.
When you're filling out the application, can you log in and out before you hit submit? You don't have to do it all in one shot.
No, not at all. When you are first popping into the application, it's going to ask you to create like a 4-digit save key or like a really short save key. Just make sure to keep that. That way you can pop in and out as many times as you need to finish up the application.
If you turn down work study, does that affect future work study in the future?
Nope.
I've heard that rumored before.
So for sure not at MSU. So every year that you fill out the FAFSA application, it gives you a fresh opportunity to say yes to work study. So we'll re-award and re-award assuming that you have that eligibility.
Any other questions? Rachel, you were good.
Oh.
So round of applause for Rachel, please. One thing I'll quick mention about the local scholarship packet that we have for all of most of the Waseca scholarships, that will come out in February. So in February, okay. Thanks for coming, everybody.